Good afternoon. This is Sam Ho with the program Community Strength on Education. And we thank you very much for the opportunity to come back with you on a weekly basis. And today is the 20th of March 2026. We thank you very much for your following us and listening to our talk shows in the last 5 years on radio, also on this podcast. And we appreciate the presence of our distinguished guests, co-host with this program with me for the last couple months is Miss Karen Martinez. She is the trustee of the San Jose Evergreen Community College District. Also, Spanish speaking translation to help our Spanish speaking audience. And also on my left is District 7 Council Member Đoàn, and certainly he was one of our co-hosts on the Community Strength Program previous to this one on the Fridays that we meet. And to his left is Mr. Hồng Cao, Director of the Vietnam Museum, and also a wonderful co-host with us here, helping out with the Vietnamese audience in terms of the language translation. This is a trilingual program, and we also have Dennis King, who is the Executive Director of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for the last, I would say, 3-4 decades. Dennis?
Not quite four.
Also the president,
Not quite that.
former student body president of the San Jose State University, as well as Fulio de Anza College, right?
Well, yes.
Yes, and certainly byproduct of the Evergreen Valley College was Mr. Hồng Cao, who became an engineer after attending EVC, then to SJSU. So, Trustee Karen Martinez, the San Jose Evergreen Community College District, has certainly done a great job in terms of building up some of our members today sitting with us. So, an honor to have you with us today. So, if we can, let's talk about this past week. A lot of very, very major information that came about this past few days that I'm sure many of us throughout the country are aware of. And it's a very important conversation for us to really have about the issues relating to the leader of the farm workers' rights movement. And to tell you the truth, that I have been serving as a board member of Center for Employment Training for over 20 years as a board member. And every single meeting, board meeting that we have, we began with the prayer of the farm workers' struggles. And we all know that prayer, and it's authored by Cesar Chavez. And Cesar Chavez, many of you see signs on the streets, buildings, names, a revered name in the American mainstream as well as in the immigrant community for the past 4 or 5 decades, at least 5 decades, 6 decades, right? 5, 6 decades. And a major contributor to the well-being of particularly the farm workers' struggles in terms of their working conditions, their health, and their salary, wages, and so forth, the well-being of a segment of the people that make it possible for us to have the fruits and vegetables that we eat every day. And he was a major champion for their well-being, impacting and advancing their livelihood and their well-being. And indirectly impact our well-being. And so a major contributor like that. But the news that came about in the last few days have really shocked the world and many of us who really are standing with the ideal of social justice. And therefore, let us talk about that. And if I can ask maybe Trustee Karen Martinez to share with us a little bit about what is that news.
So the news has been with regards to Cesar Chavez and him abusing women and young girls. And I will have to say, in the community, there has been talks, lots of talks, way before this has come out, about Cesar Chavez. However, there was nothing that was concrete that was ever solidified. However, now with 2 children that Dolores Huerta has stated are his children, I could only assume that with that there is an actual blood test verification that is of that. And I'd like to say, as a woman of color, a Latina, this it sickens me on a variety of levels. And the reason why is that sometimes as women and women leaders that I am, is that sometimes we aren't able to always do what our male counterparts do. And I'll give you an example of that. We could share a policy that could be controversial but emotional in some way. We as women have to hold back anything of any kind, because if we show any emotion of some sort, I'll only speak for myself, is that it seems that we're leading off an emotion versus an actual fact. Where a man, on the other hand, can lead and become emotional about what they are proposing or doing. And it's how empathetic, how, they're looked at differently. And so with that, we women sometimes are very silenced and not able to do what we know to do because of how we're viewed by men, to be perfectly frank. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to learn from the situation and work not to repeat it. And I always believe 2 things. One, we never put any of us on a pedestal, because that's a setup for failure, right? Because none of us are perfect. So I think when we do that, we're setting ourselves up to be failed, right? And I think the other part is accountability and staying humble. And I think that is probably one of the most important things. And I think why I have been able to stay the leader that I've been consistently and trusted by our community since 2012 is because of my family that keeps me humble. I'm a mother and I'm a wife, and those are my first and foremost priorities and in our community. And so how I govern is also how I lead with my family. And I'm sorry, I know that was a lot, but this has been a huge, so much emotions come up from it. Just the dishonesty, the using of a community that has such a need, and it's basically using people for your own gain. And that is not okay. It's not okay for me as a leader, and I would hope that it is not okay for other leaders. But we all have a price to pay, and karma is real. And leading by example is something that I work to do every day, all day. I just wish that there are more of us that work to do the same thing with integrity. Yeah.
Không biết là anh Hồng có muốn share that in Vietnamese a little bit. Tôi muốn nói là cái anh Sam thì cũng có nhắc tới vấn đề trong tuần rồi đã có một cái sự kiện rất là sôi nổi đó. Tức là cái ông Cesar Chavez, ông là một cái người lãnh đạo, một người sáng lập ra một cái, nó gọi là một cái nghiệp đoàn, người mời về là cái farmer, tức là người mà làm về ruộng làm nông. Thì bất thình lình thì như chúng ta đã biết, ông là một cái người rất là nổi tiếng. Thậm chí là nếu mà mình nói thêm đó là ông đã có tên ở trên những cái trung tâm ở tại
ở tại San Jose cũng đã có, ngay đường Market cũng có một cái plaza tên của ổng. Đồng thời đó chúng ta cũng biết rằng là ở các vài cái tiểu bang cũng đã có đặt cái ngày lễ cho cái tên của ổng, chẳng hạn California hay là Arizona hay là bên Colorado này kia đó. Thì mình thấy như vậy đó là cái sự kiện xảy ra là Sam Hồn nó đặt ra đó là cái rất là sôi nổi, đó là người ta phanh phui ra, người ta tố cáo rằng ổng đã có liên quan tới vấn đề tình dục, trong cái vấn đề sách nhiễu tình dục mà trong thời gian mà ổng làm việc. Thì cái bà mà Karen này là thì bà cũng có giải thích, bà nói rằng là đối với những cái cảm xúc của những người là một cái người phụ nữ thì khác thường lắm, trong việc có xảy ra những cái chuyện đó thường là họ giữ một cái im lặng, họ không có bộc lộ ra nhiều. Nhưng mà những cái chuyện này đó, khi mà nó lại xảy ra như vậy đó, nó gây ra một ảnh hưởng rất là rộng lớn đối với lại tất cả những cái sự kiện mà đã xảy ra như vậy đó. Thì bà cũng có nói rằng là với một tính cách là một người đàn bà, một người mẹ đó, thì những cái chuyện đó chắc chắn là không có thể nào mà mình có thể chấp nhận được. Nhưng mà mọi sự ở đây đó thì theo tôi nghĩ là nó cũng còn có một cái, đây là một cái sự kiện mà xảy ra và ông này ông đã mất rồi, chứ ông không còn sống nữa. Thì vẫn cho tới bây giờ theo tôi nghĩ vẫn chưa có một cái bằng chứng nào hết về cái vấn đề mà những cái tội phạm đó. Nhưng mà đã được những cái người mà những nhân chứng rất là khả tín đã nêu ra chuyện đó, kể cả những cái người mà trực tiếp làm việc rất gần gũi lại với lại ông Chavez này đã xảy ra là như vậy.
Well, very good, very good. If you don't mind, kind of
Yes,
summarize that
summarize
in
it.
Spanish.
Este sobre el tema hoy es lo que hemos escuchado y ahora sabemos lo que ha hecho a Cesar Chavez, que nos refleja a nosotros como una comunidad y más que nada sigue volviendo, enseñándonos en una forma u otra la poder de nosotros como mujeres, lo que tenemos que mantener en nuestra comunidad y en nuestras familias de fuerzas para asegurar que podemos seguir adelante, y en veces con eso no usamos nuestras voces porque lo pensamos en lo más grande y en veces no nos ponemos primero para que podamos poner uno o alguien abajo o encima, y tenemos que tener cuidado cuando ponemos a alguien como más alto que uno, porque ninguno de nosotros debemos ese tipo de poder. Ninguna persona, porque ninguna persona es perfecto.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. Well, let's hear from Dennis and then Council Member Đoàn.
It's a very, very difficult subject for so many of us. As a young man, I had the honor to march with him. And that was one of my main entrees to the overall Latino community. So it's sort of like waking up one morning and finding out that your best friend is a bank robber.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Suddenly the wonderful legacy, a wonderful example that he set for so many people is tarnished now. There is a lesson, probably more than one, to be learned from this moment. So one of my great disappointments in our educational institutions is the lack of teaching about what democracy is all about. Most of our schools teach democracy as a moment in history of personalities doing one thing or another, not understanding really it's about community and how community comes together to protect itself.
That's right.
And in that sense, we need to make a distinction between the message and the messenger. And the message of democracy and of protection, of equality, of championing each other's rights and rising the whole community, that should never be concentrated in one personality. That's the community that's standing up for the community. The sad thing, and certainly you see it all through the Bible, that you see people that we have always commemorated and celebrated are human beings, and they make mistakes, sometimes tragic mistakes. Maybe a moment of weakness or being selfish, or for whatever reasons. And to what extent does that distract from the message? So part of the challenge, and I'm sorry if I'm talking too loud, is to understand that there is a difference between the message that we need, we're all in this together, we're all in this community together, versus us fragile messengers of that message. So somewhere in there is a lesson for today. You know, we need to move forward. It's more than just taking down the signs and the photographs that commemorates an issue or a person. My office, I've got several pictures of Cesar Chavez. Probably one of the only chambers of commerce that does. So he means something very special to us. It's hard to explain the sense of betrayal and disappointment and the glossing over of his humanness to make him something more than what he is. So in that sense, our community has been robbed again, and it's keenly disappointing. But we can't surrender. We need to understand what's that message that was being sent, and how do we as a community gather that message and move forward.
Well, thank you for being on the show with us today, because hearing that you were walking with him on one of those marches, that is a significant witness that you have of him, and I think that must have really impacted you in many ways, more than most of us who never marched with us.
Dude, that's for him at San Jose State. And that was more than just a march. I've interacted with him and his family for decades.
Right.
So it's profoundly personal, as well as just a commentary about us as a community.
Councilmember Đoàn. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for hosting this trilingual, and in the end, we're a community where we come together for a purpose, and the purpose is about helping each other. How do we help our communities come together? Pardon me. In this time of disappointment and hurt, how do we heal? And for me, it's I cannot imagine having to spend 60 years of this emotional pain, the emotional suffering in silence. I have a daughter, I have nieces and nephew, and I have a mother. And every one of us, and I always say this, every one of us exists on this earth because we have a mother, and she's a woman. And we should always respect, protect, and support them. And allow them to have a voice when something like this happens, even when you're young or you're old, to be able to come out, to be able to feel that we are there for them, to protect them, and not to be afraid. And you know what? Not only what happened, but the recovery. How do you recover from this? How do they recover from this as a victim? It would take a lifetime. And maybe they will never recover. But in order for them to have a voice, it's extremely important. We never let one person destroy the legacy of the United Farm Workers. I was fortunate to inherit the work of the United Farm Workers. I came here in 1975 as an immigrant / refugee. I was working out in the field, picking grape, oranges, driving tractor, receiver, shaker, digging ditches with an immigrant. And I understand the movement that had helped all of us.
to be where we're at, but we don't let it define by one person. It's a united, collaborative from many, many people, including many women who have stood behind the scene and worked incredibly and their sacrifice to bring that movement to this modern day. For the lack of words, I feel the pain and the suffering, and I want for us to take this lesson and we be even stronger and united even better, to be more organized, to be able to learn this lesson and take this lesson and bring all of us. And I don't care what nationality, what ethnicity, what race or gender. We come together and stand strong to make this an empowerment and inspiring for young women to never have to suffer something like this. And that's, to me, there's a lot of deep thoughts and meaning to me in this. And, I don't want this to become my endeavor. I want this to become our endeavor, our effort, our organization to make it better.
But I heard about that the council member of this and the mayor, Mahan, they try to review something. Is it this?
I think maybe there is a memorandum come out. It will be coming out, and it will talk about particular. I haven't seen it, but but I'll say this: anything that we can inspire and empower and make our community better and making our young women to have a voice. I'm all in on that, and it's very. I felt very personal about this, and I know that again. We all have a mother, and she's a woman. We need to respect, protect, and support, and at any age.
But before we can translate to Vietnamese, I would like to express, I have a question about what level we can rely on to determine that this the fact is only based upon some witness. And what the level we think that's the real thing. What do you mean? What I say when you try to condemn or to say that's whatever he did, Chavez did in the past, but it's I understand only a couple witnesses only, not the any proof. So how come it's right now it come to the
the proof is DNA. The proof is that Dolores Huerta had 2 children. She was on many interviews where she has stated that the first time she was, he coerced her into being intimate, and the second time he outright raped her. In both incidences, it produced a child, and both of those children were cared for by other family members, I believe, and so that's one.
Let me respond. I may take an issue that probably nobody else is taking to. I won't say defend Cesar Chavez, but to say it's a little bit more complicated. Our laws are still based on due process, and the unfortunate problem when you accusing somebody who's been dead for 30 years, that person won't be able to rise up and defend his actions. So it's good that we men now automatically assume that the woman is correct. But if we're going to follow our own laws, then there is the question of due process. And that is, we need to understand what the complaints are, give them a fair response. DNA is not going to work in this case because she was living with his brother. So DNA will not make a distinction between brothers in terms of who's responsible. that was the same historic problem then with Thomas Jefferson and his relationship with Sally. That is, was it Thomas Jefferson, or was it a son of Thomas Jefferson, or some other relative? And to do some years after the fact, science becomes a little less accurate. So I think it's good for us men to shift historically to believe women first rather than to dismiss them. But the greater truth that nobody's talking about is the concept of due process. And for that, I think that the way forward needs to be based on respect, certainly with the courage that it takes for women to come forth and say, absolutely. But let's move cautiously. Let us not destroy a legacy immediately. Let's really try to understand the ramifications of that.
And this
But
is
the
why,
question-
as a mother, as a woman, though,
Yeah.
you don't come out because of that. And the other part of that is that sometimes women, and we all can confirm, right? We all had mothers, and because of that, we exist. But then why do men do that to women when they have had mothers? So I think that's a question for you all to answer. I can't answer that, right? But the second part of it is that as women, we have a high tolerance for life and things that we endure for a variety of reasons. We have an inner strength that I can't even begin to explain to you all of what that is. But our ability to endure is something that it's a gift and a curse. But I want to re-emphasize, though, this is the reason why women don't come forth. And another part of this is, I also believe culturally, is that I don't even know necessarily how to explain it other than trying to put myself back into that time when women didn't speak and didn't have a voice, and you were allowed to work with someone of that stature in the community. So can you even begin to imagine of what was going on in the inability to even work to come forth is one thing just to consider and to think about, right? And I get due process.
To be fair, no, we men probably can't.
Right,
We really
right. And so I want to help you to empathize, right?
Yes. Well, that's
Is
why
all.
I did say on a very personal basis, I like the fact that, at least what I'm hearing among our colleagues of the men in our community, is that it appears that we instinctively now say, let's support the woman.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. That is certainly transformational. That is certainly different than, well, actually different than most of this country, right, and most of our history. So I think that indicates that there certainly has been a shift.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, let's be cautious, not just quickly tear down one person and automatically throw up another. Let's have that dialogue in the community and say, what are all these lessons that we're learning?
I think the dialogue is a very important opportunity for us to have. It's going to be a transformational incident that is going to be historical for where things are going to go in the future for the better. Because as we know, the union, as my learning served me correctly, the union never got established until in the 30s after the Depression, right?
Yes.
The labor union. And that's part of that is to advance this justice for the workers, for the less fortunate, and so we have a better life today because of that movement. And if we don't protect it, it will go away. It's just natural, because the question for us is, I say, I am so glad that my daughter is born in this day of an age. I would never want my daughter to grow up during the 60s even, because there was no civil rights laws. So if something like this happened, why would a woman or a daughter speak up?
That's
Because
right.
there's nothing to protect them.
They don't even speak up now.
Right? They don't even speak up now with all these laws in place, and we have to learn the lesson that we all have mothers and sisters.
Mhm.
Why do we allow that?
Exactly.
Why do we allow women not to vote until 1920,
Right.
when the country was independent in 776 or before that? Why do men allow that to happen to their
Exactly.
daughter, to their mother,
Exactly.
to the aunts?
That's right.
Right? I would not, conscience, ethically, conscience-wise. Why would they let that happen? And then today they have to go into the 70s, where they're going to have the equal rights amendments and the movements for the women's rights after 50 years of being able to vote, right? And so we look at that as every step of the way is a fight.
Mhm.
And then men are supposed to protect their wives and their daughters,
Yes.
and they don't.
Right.
So that is to understand the human feebles and really the weaknesses in human. That as we learn the lesson that once a person has the power, they will abuse that power.
That's right.
And that's why they have a saying that absolute power
Mhm.
abuse or corrupts absolutely.
Mhm.
And that's just to remind us that we have to keep balance, and we
That's
have
right.
to make sure that everyone has a voice.
That's
And I'm very thankful that through this experience and through the all the paper source like New York Times and all that, they did an extensive investigation into this before they come out with the articles.
Mhm.
And so we all can search that and we can read that. But evidence has been shown sufficient enough for us to think that more likely than not that it might have happened. And I agree with you, due process has to take place. But when do we wait for that? We have to take action. And the United Farm Worker Organization has taken very strong action. Take away anything that has to deal with the name Cesar Chavez. In fact, CET is supposed to have a breakfast,
That's
Cesar Chavez breakfast, in the next few days.
Well,
And I'm on that board.
you and I have gone to that for many years.
Oh, many years. And it's a wonderful community event. I look forward to it. It's one of the best events that we have, similar to the Martin Luther King Day luncheon. It's a powerful event, and we all can come together and we can really say, let's fight for justice for everyone. Let's take care of each other by standing together for justice. And it's a wonderful event. But CET has informed right away that we cancel all that. And a lot of these murals, a lot of these names that are dedicated to Cesar Chavez, whether it's Cesar this plaza in downtown, I don't know what the city's gonna do,
Right.
but at San Jose Evergreen Community College District, we are taking that very seriously,
Yes.
and we may be following the direction of all these organizations, including you, the farm worker, that there is anything that relates to Cesar Chavez's name. It's not going to be there until when it's different, that we find out different. But now they are going to take an action that these women's voices, two teenage girls that were now in their 60s, were molested and were raped basically by him, and that they have kept until now they are in their 60s. And then we have the most credible voice is the Dolores Huerta, who has shared that she mothered two children from him. And so it's hard to say, let's wait, right? So I think that therefore there's a lot of this action that's going to say, okay, we're going to put the men out of the picture. We continue with the cause. And the main thing is that what was the message, like you said? What was the cause? What was the fight that we are fighting for? And that is the well-being of the less fortunate in our community. And in the case that we are talking about here is the farm workers. Are we taking care of our community, making sure that they have the health that we deserve, that they deserve? And do they have the wage that is a living wage, like everybody should deserve, or that they would have the justice opportunities, just like we all should have as human beings? And that's one again is going to remind us that are we going to follow that cause, that message, and not put one man on the pedestal.
That's right.
And that is the sin and the
Yes.
mistake that we learn
Yes.
over and over, even in the religious circles.
Mhm.
And therefore, don't ever put a minister, a
Yeah.
pastor, or a religious or a politician,
That's right.
any one person on the pedestal, because one day we're going to find out and we're going to be disappointed.
Mhm.
So we have to think of, okay, social justice is the main message here that I think it reminds us that separate the individual from the message and the cause. I don't know if that's how you see the outcome of this is don't put one person on the pedestal.
That's the bottom line. I think that's the bottom line.
Mhm.
And I think one other thing, I really, my heart goes out to the wife of Cesar Chavez. Can you imagine? She still lives today, just so you know.
Oh.
Right?
Ellen.
And not only his wife, but his children that have nothing to do with the other, right? You know, what we do doesn't define what our children or vice versa, right? But when, you know, someone has been assaulted in some shape or form, and this is why I believe that it's more true than not true, is the fact is that these people who were victimized, I'll call them, they were, I'm sure, asked, you know, features that only someone would know if there were some sort of a unfortunate intimacy of some sort, right? It could be a scar. It could be a variety of different things that could then be verified by his wife. And again, as a woman, and I can only begin to empathize and understand what she's gone through as well all of these years. Because can you imagine? She's married to Cesar Chavez. She has to take a backseat on a constant, right? And so we also know what we have, right? And so there's sometimes that as women, we close a blind eye to certain things because, again, our inner strength is to work to support, to keep our families together. And so the fact of the matter that not only the foundation, but the family themselves have pulled back, I think there might be some truth to all of that. And I understand that your personal connection and those things, but I think that I would fall back on, that's where we sometimes get ourselves into potential errors in judgment, because again, none of us are perfect, right? And Dolores Huerta herself said is his own demons. And I'm sorry, I think everybody can, empathize their own demons, right? Because again, none of us are perfect. But that's where I think that I sent the chancellor immediately that morning a request for us to take a moment and ensure that this triggers so many things. This triggers other women who've not come out yet, who've held things for years, not about Cesar Chavez, but about their own situations. This is so triggering on a variety of different levels that only someone who's been victimized in some shape or form, emotionally, physically, spiritually, would even have an ability to understand. Let alone more so women than men, because the reality is more women are victimized than men. However, men are also, right? And so I think at this point, in order to begin to heal, it's to take a step back and listen. Listen and not respond. So, and I will only speak as a woman now. I can only speak as a woman. When I speak to my husband, sometimes I say, I just need to say this, but I'm not asking you to fix this. I just need you need to be heard. And because sometimes I think, because I'm not a man, sometimes as men, you want to fix it because you care about us and you want to make sure that we're okay. And sometimes we just want to get something out. And I think that we need to allow community an opportunity to get it out without attempting to fix it. And for us to really listen to figure out how we're going to move because of what this is triggering in so many different ways with so many different people. And
But you're
Yeah.
being fair to
yes,
Cal.
I think to paraphrase for sure.
Yes, so anh Hồng và Cao.
Thực ra đó cái cuộc tranh luận nãy giờ nói chuyện với nhau nó rất là dài qua cho tất cả rất nhiều người, từ ông Dennis cho tới anh Viên Đoàn, cho tới bà Karen, cho tới anh Sam Hồ. Thì vì thời gian nó cũng giới hạn, ông chỉ có tóm tắt thôi. Thì tất cả chẳng như là ông Dennis ông có nói vấn đề đó, đây là vấn đề đó, cái chuyện này xảy ra rất là khó khăn và rất là nó rất là phức tạp, để cho cái vấn đề mà nhất là nó xảy ra ở một cái người mà nổi tiếng như vậy. Giống như là bà Karen, bà nói là với một cái tính cách là một cái người đàn bà, là một cái người mẹ, và bây giờ đó bà đặt cái vấn đề ra đó, cái vấn đề này nó đặt không phải là cái chuyện này mà nó là một cái hệ lụy, nó xảy ra nó làm tất cả mọi người, cả vợ con gia đình, tất cả mọi người đều có bị ảnh hưởng tới đó. Thì anh Sam Hồ nãy anh cũng có giải thích, anh có nói rằng là trong cái chuyện này đó là có những cái bằng cớ, nhưng có những cái mà chẳng hạn như là những cái DNA, những cái người mà đã là nạn nhân của ông xác nhận. Vì tôi có đặt cái vấn đề, tôi hỏi ở tới cái mức độ nào đó thì mình có thể mình nói là cái chuyện này là cái chuyện là đúng sự thật, thì rõ ràng đây nó có những DNA. Nhưng mà cái cá nhân tôi rất là đáng tiếc, tại vì cái chuyện này nó đã không có come out ra trước đây, mà đợi tới khi ông này ông đã mất rồi, ông đất mất rồi mà đưa ra đó, thì bây giờ đó như chúng ta có đặt vấn đề, nó đã có rất nhiều cái vấn đề, chẳng hạn như những cái danh dự của ông, những cái vinh danh ông, những cái đặt tên ông, những cái ngày lễ ông, bây giờ tất cả đều phải suy nghĩ lại. Thì tôi cũng có nói chuyện với anh Viên Đoàn, đó là cái anh Viên Đoàn có nói là ông thị trưởng McMahon cũng như là một ông nghị viên là ông Otis thì cũng có nói cái vấn đề là sẽ review lại những cái đó. Thì anh Viên Đoàn nói hiện giờ cũng chưa thấy được cái giấy tờ gì hết. Thì nói tóm lại đó, trong cái vấn đề này đó, như bà Karen bà nói, tất cả mọi thứ mình phải chờ để xem, có thể có những cái khác nó sẽ come out ra nữa, chẳng hạn không phải là những cái người nạn nhân, bây giờ là còn có những cái người nạn nhân nữa, là vì cái chuyện này đã xảy ra rất lâu. Và tại vì đối với cá nhân tôi đó, thì vì ông là cái người đã làm việc và đã lập ra một cái nghiệp đoàn nó rất là hùng mạnh, rất vững vàng. Đã có nhiều khi như bà Karen mà có nói đó, là người đàn bà đó là cái thường là họ không muốn nói, họ cảm nhận, họ giữ cái suffer đó. Nhưng mà đối với cá nhân tôi, nhiều khi tùy theo cái đối tượng, có thể cái người đó là một cái người họ có một cái quyền lực, họ có những cái ảnh hưởng lớn, thành ra cái người đó không muốn tiếp xúc, không muốn đưa ra vấn đề đó. Nhưng nói tóm lại, cái câu chuyện này đã là một cái vấn đề, một cái bom nó nổ ra, xảy ra vậy là nó tạo ra rất nhiều cái hệ lụy và tất cả nhiều cái vấn đề phức tạp khác cho tất cả mọi người.
Let's see in Spanish.
Yeah. Más estaba hablando sobre una mujer y una mujer latina, que en veces nosotros en nuestra cultura no hablamos de cosas sensitivas porque pensamos de la situación en total, y por nuestras fuerzas que nos ha dado y que tenemos, no hacemos o hablamos sobre cosas porque pensamos en lo grande, en el peligro que puede ser que va a suceder dentro de la familia, dentro de una comunidad, y por eso en veces nosotros como mujeres no hablamos, y eso es algo que ha mejorado, pero todavía existe hoy día, y por esta razón personas, más que nada mujeres, no hablamos sobre situaciones que puede ser que ha pasado, porque de lo principio lo que van a decir, que no los van a creer por tal cual cosa. Y mejor que nos callamos, y eso es algo históricamente que ha pasado a mujeres, y pues no importa de la raza, realmente mujeres en total.
Well, I just want to say a few things. I really appreciate your point of the due process. And then I think the lesson to move forward is that right off the bat, we need to protect our children and our women, for them to feel safe in order to voice themselves if something happened. In order for us to know and to protect, we need to know about it, because too many years, too many people have been in silence. And for people to come out, they need to feel safe. And they know that there is a due process that support the victim as well. And I think a lot of time we forget about our victims. Victims may have spent years, maybe until they died, of suffering. And I think it's important that we teach our younger generation that you can stand up to say what happened to you, and our due process and all laws, and as a council member, we will do everything in our power to protect you until it is proven otherwise. And I think it's important that we do that.
In another context, you take it for granted, essentially, that what the woman said is true. And you certainly want to respect the victims. In another context, in a greater context, in a sense, we've all been victims. Because this is one of the darkest chapters of American history that we're in right now. And we just lost one of the lights of inspiration. One of the lights that so much of our community, particularly the Latino community, is facing the brutality as a community that is facing right now. There's very few lights of hope that the community has in this dark period. What a double tragedy is to lose what another symbol of hope. Somehow, as a community, we need to replace that hope and to replace that with a statement from the community that we are here bigger than what one individual can do, but as a community can do.
And I think with that is that we need to do that within ourselves. And we need to be that hope. And we need to walk that light. And I think there's so many things that have gone on that for, maybe women who have been victimized. The unfortunate part, we have an Epstein file, right? And we're not even listening to those victims. And you think for a minute that these who've just come forth with regards to Cesar Chavez are going to feel like their voice is going to matter when there is supposedly actual proof and so on for people who have been elite and have mistreated women for however long and have gotten a slap on the wrist and continue to move on. So
they didn't even get a slap.
Well, right. I guess we can say that. Look, at the end of the day, I think that women have continued to be victimized, and men have taken a part in that, and we women have mothered men, and none of us would be here without our mother. And so I think all we can do as individuals is lead by example, do our very best to ensure that we respect one another, and that's really all that we can do, and be very mindful about not putting anyone on a pedestal, because people do what they do because they're allowed to do it. And so if we don't give people the power, additional power that's not theirs to have, then that's how we could, begin to have a different perspective and a different point of view.
So let's close with the final comment quickly.
That's my closing.
But mainly, I think that through this we learn about one thing, like we talked about, is what is the purpose, or what is the mission that we're trying to achieve, and focus on the mission, because a mission is larger than any one person, and not to lose sight of that mission. And the mission is to build a more just society and watch out for each other's well-being and treat others as we would like to be treated.
That's
And
right.
I think that's really the main ideal that we want to live up to, and not let that be foreshadowed or weakened by one person.
Right.
Certainly one of the questions for us on an ongoing basis as a species, not just as an American, is coming to terms with how does a man learn to become a man? How does a woman learn to become a woman? And how do we create that process that is going to be based on respect? And we can't leave it, that's too important a task to just assume an educator is going to do it. I mean, that expression that it takes a village to raise someone, that's a truth for our entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So it raises very troubling questions. And what kind of future are we making for our children when our heroes have hollow feet?
Okay. Anyone else? Well, I think it's a great opportunity, and our heroes or inspirational could be anyone. It could be Dolores, right? So to have the courage and the power to stand out after all these years and say it out loud. And I think that, again, the lesson to learn here, I want to inspire and empower our young women, or women in general, that you can say it out loud. You can go out there and say what happened to you, and we want to make sure that our society stand with you and protect you so that you can feel safe in this, new world that we're living in. And I hope that this is a lesson for all of us, both men, women, and every ethnicity, that we can move forward with pride, dignity, and treat everyone with respect. Anything else?
Tôi cũng muốn tóm tắt lại là nãy giờ đó, nhưng mà cái phần này cũng giống như phần kết luận của mọi người, cũng như ông Dennis hay là người Việt Đoàn có nói chuyện đó, là bây giờ đó câu chuyện này đó nó là cái bài học cho tất cả mọi người. Thì ông nói là cái người đàn ông phải có những cái phận sự là ông người đàn bà, có phận sự của người đàn bà. Và như anh Biên Đoàn nói đó, đây là một cái tổng kết này đó, thì những cái người nạn nhân đó là cái người đàn bà nạn nhân, và mình cũng phải biết là họ có những cái can đảm, khi họ can đảm họ nói ra cái sự thật đó. Và đây là một cái bài học để cho chúng ta biết, cũng như là nãy giờ chúng ta đã biết, giống như anh Sam anh có nói đó, không bao giờ mình đặt cho một cái người đó một cái quyền lực quá đáng để mà xảy ra những cái chuyện như vậy. Thì có thể nói rằng đây là một cái sự kiện mà chúng ta cùng nhau để học hỏi, để chúng ta tránh được những cái hậu quả sau này, là làm sao để giúp cho cái người nạn nhân đó, họ có thể họ come out ra để họ nói những cái chuyện đã xảy ra đối với họ. Và những cái chuyện này đối với chúng tôi cũng đồng ý với bà Karen đó, đối với bà là cái người đàn bà, đó là một sự rất là khó khăn để người đàn bà họ nói được những cái chuyện đó, nhất là cái chuyện đó là xảy ra tới cái chuyện này nó liên quan tới cả cái danh dự của họ.
Spanish, and then we close.
Sure. Yo creo que más que nada la importancia es que como mujeres que nuestro voz tiene valor, y más que nada es cómo lo usamos y cómo podemos hacer un cambio, es para asegurar que cuando lo usamos lo usamos con la atención para mejorar cualquier situación. Y que si uno ha sido víctima de cualquier cosa, que hablamos, y que es el tiempo para hablar, y no dejar lo que puede ser que le ha pasado a uno en lo pasado, porque lo que nos ha pasado en el pasado los afecta en lo presente y también en el futuro. Y que nosotros como mujeres lo pensamos tantito más, porque tenemos mucho poder, pero nomás es cómo usamos nuestro poder por lo mejor de uno. Gracias.
Thank you, Trustee Karen Martinez, Executive Director Dennis King, Director Hồng Cao, and Council Member Biên Đoàn. Thank you all. We appreciate your listening to us, and may you have a wonderful weekend.
Good night. Be safe.